also measures taken to prevent future flows of illegal immigrants, specifically the SAVE Act, which would require mandatory verification. If those were combined with the DREAM Act, I would vote for it as a congressman. CIS itself doesn't have a position on this sort of thing, but yeah, if I were in Congress, I would vote for a modified version of the DREAM Act. Yeah.
You're pro-orphan, basically.
Excuse me?
You're pro-orphan, basically.
What does that mean?
You
We have immigration orphans.
Kids, but no parents in the picture.
Yeah, right. Because they're adult kids. They're not. The whole point is only for adults. The DREAM Act doesn't apply to children. It applies to people brought here as children who have therefore grown up here and.
High school students or graduates of high school graduates.
Right, that's my point. So the second point is the is SPLC smears that were terrible and evil. First of all, no horns here. All of our work is online at cis.org. Everything we've ever written or published or anything, take a look at it. We got a report coming out on the SPLC's smear campaign, and all I can really say about it is I'm really encouraged that the Open Borders left is carrying on the deep commitment to accuracy and free expression of ideas that Joe McCarthy pioneered in the 1950s.
Hello, my question is for Mark Krikorian too. My name is Kyle DeBosse. I'm one of the people that published an op-ed in the Crimson yesterday listing what I think was a very pretty useful case of your extremism and your words, your actions, your affiliations. But you know, the point I wanted to make is not to use those, but to attack your policies. Really, I mean, you understand you can't deport 11 million undocumented immigrants, so you come up with this policy you call attrition through enforcement, which for those that have trouble understanding Mr. Krikorian's academic jargon, attrition is a military term. It means to wear down your enemy to the point of collapse. You understand the only way that you can get immigrants out of this country is to make them so miserable they leave on their own. In my country, Guatemala, they had a word for that in the Civil War. It was the military said, you know, si no puedes atrapar a los peces, tienes que drenar el mar. You know, if you can't catch the fish, you have to drain the ocean. I'm not suggesting you're in favor of massacring migrants, but that's what you're doing when you're talking about attrition through enforcement. The migrants are the fish, and the ocean is our communities. When you're separating families. When you're making it so that workers can't go against their employers, when you're making it so migrants so fearful they can't go to their so fearful they can't go to the police. So I was wondering if you could respond to that, to attrition to enforcement. More importantly, I want to ask you if you approve or disapprove of the views of John Tanton, the person who was instrumental in founding your organization.
It's the prerogative of the moderator how much you want to talk about the origins of CIS and all the rest of it. John Tanton's an eye doctor, retired eye doctor, did in fact help get the first grant for CIS. And that's it. We've nothing to do with the guy, he doesn't tell us what to do. What I really find interesting about this whole narrative about how, how evil everybody on the restrictionist side is that it's so profoundly uninformed. It is so divorced from the actual reality that I mean, I don't even know what, I find it difficult to recognize. Let me ask you a question before I talk about attrition, because this is important. Name me one immigration skeptic, any immigration skeptic anywhere in the country that you think is not a bad, evil, whatever the adjectives are, guy. Take your time. No, name one. Excuse me. Name one who is okay.
I like the Massachusetts Coalition Against Immigration Reform. I think they're a good group. I think they're more moderate than you are, and they don't have the same extremist ties that you do. I want you to answer my question. Do you approve or disapprove of John Tanton's views? You comment on everything.
John Tanton's views on what?
On the educability of Latinos, whether we should have a European American majority. All these things you said. You comment on everything from Sonia Sotomayor's name to the colonization of Haiti, but you can't comment on his views.
The particular things that have been picked out that he has said in a sort of ransom note kind of method of analysis, yeah, I definitely disagree with. Okay. He is a big tent kind of guy who draws the big tent. There's in the 30s in the European politics, there was this idea of no enemies to the left, that liberal, moderate left-wing parties would not criticize those farther to the left. Tanton has a sort of no enemies to the restrictionist, in the restrictionist direction, which isn't a right or left thing. policy, kind of a big tent policy, and his big tent is too big. There's just no question about that. I don't disagree with that at all.
That's the first time I've heard you publicly say that. I
I've
appreciate
said that before, and like I said, we have a report coming out on this issue.
In the spirit of friendship, you know, this draining the ocean to kill the fish, I've bought you a piece of fish for dinner tonight.
Okay, well, thank you. It's Lent, and I don't eat any animal flesh during Lent, even fish. Let me address, though, the policy aspect of the question. This is attrition policy. It's actually not a military policy. It's a workforce term. And when you downsize a corporation, downsize the workforce of a corporation, you do it in three ways. Layoffs, which is the equivalent of deportations, actually removing people. Attrition, which is the natural retirement or resignation of people to go on to other things. And a freeze on new hires, which is, in the illegal immigration context, is reducing the number of new illegals to come in. And the insight of an attrition through enforcement policy is that the goal is not to make the whole thing go away and deport everybody tomorrow, like some scene out of the Ten Commandments where everybody's, you know, crossing the Red Sea or something. That's not possible. We couldn't do it if we wanted to. But the way it's been presented is either we do that, or we have to legalize everybody. And the insight of an attrition policy is that no, the goal is not magically making the problem disappear. It's getting the problem to shrink from one year to the next instead of continue to increase from one year to the next. And that's why the drop in the illegal population by something like 10 or even 15% over the past couple of years, which started before the recession, but obviously has been accelerated by the recession, is an encouraging sign. If the illegal population can be made to shrink from 12.5 million to 11 million, well then let's keep trying and see how much more we can get it to shrink before we have a discussion about legalization.
Okay, so I want to just interrupt this now because I do think we're getting into a different area, in particular the question of the status, the rights, and the exploitation of the current undocumented population can't be ignored in a discussion over whether it makes sense to just try to stay with the status quo and have a reduction in that by not doing anything. And I think what you're saying, Mark, is essentially it doesn't matter what the treatment is of people who are here in undocumented status right now. Let's just keep trying with the current system and let them continue to suffer. But that's a different discussion than the one that we're having. So I want to come back to the conversation we are having. I want to invite people to make the comments they want to make.